What's up, Sarah? Paycheck here. For today's video, I'm going to be showing you the Immortal one-shot Mage build that I've been playing, so let's go ahead and get started. So for this build, you can pretty much use any element and any spells that you want. I personally went with lightning spells just because I think they look cool, but if you wanted to switch it up and go with fire spells, cold spells, plague spells, anything you want, then just absolutely go for it. Just keep in mind when you're looking at my gear to replace anything that you see that says lightning damage and replace it with the element of whatever spells you're going with. So looking at the gear, the first thing I'm going to go over is the body armor. This is by far the most important item on this build, or really any build you're playing because of how unbelievably powerful and broken it is. There's three main things that you're looking for on every single body armor you ever use in this game as of the current patch. And that starts with the durable facet for increased durability on the item. You're going to pair that with the enchantments that say durability increased by 75 and then the damage resistance increased by a percentage of current durability. Those three mods are what are going to make basically every single build in the game as close to immortal as you can be, if not fully immortal. So those are mandatory, doesn't matter what kind of character you're playing. Beyond that, for this build, after that, we just stack damage. So I went with crit damage and then lightning damage. Again, you can replace the lightning damage with whatever element of spells that you're actually playing with. For the plagued mod and the gems, they're all going to be focused on being at full focus. So the plague mod says damage resistance reduced if not at full focus. And then the gem that we use says enchantment power increased at full focus. So this build will always be at full focus. So the plagued mod doesn't actually impact us whatsoever. It's never going to activate. And the gem, which that gem we are going to put in every single item that we have, is going to be active 100% of the time. So how do we actually stay at full focus 100% of the time? Well, that brings me to our rings. So first, the build enabling ring for this build is the battle cry ring, which says spend health instead of focus. So every time we cast our spells, it uses our health instead of our focus. That's what allows us to stay at full focus 100% of the time. So this is a mandatory ring for this build. Secondly, I use a Scarlet Ring to swap max health and max focus. This is because focus scales faster than health does based on your attribute points. So you actually get more health by adding points into focus as opposed to not wearing this ring and just adding points into health regularly. So that's why I use that ring. And then finally, we have the rune ring. This is just for the rune damage increase. And then the plague mod that says attack damage gets reduced. That doesn't actually impact us since we're not dealing any attack damage. Next up, we have the pants. I use magic pants instead of plague pants because magic pants have access to the standard increased movement speed mod. So I use magic pants for that. I also use the frantic facet on the pants for even more increased movement speed. And then the final two mods on there, the final two enchantments, is just more crit damage and lightning damage. For gloves, I use a pair with the Rapid Facet. The Rapid Facet says it grants increased attack speed, but oddly enough, that seems to also increase our cast speed, so who would have thought? So I use the Rapid Facet, and then as for the enchantments that we're looking for, it's primarily crit chance. I tried to get that as high as I possibly could, so I fully exalted the crit chance on here. Overall, for this character, I generally try to reach at least 85% crit chance, if not 100%. So you will need crit chance on at least one item, and if it's not fully exalted crit chance, then you're going to need it on at least two items. So just be aware of that. But outside of the crit chance, I then also take the lightning damage, which I have on pretty much every single item. And then we actually also take armor penetration. So armor penetration does actually increase our spell damage, or the amount of spell damage that enemies take. Because armor does actually increase your elemental resists in this game. So if we penetrate the enemy's armor, then we're also basically penetrating their elemental resists. So armor penetration is a damage increase for spellcaster builds and elemental builds. And then finally, the last mod I put on here was the physical resistance. Elemental resistance we get on all of our rings. Physical resistance we do not. So physical resistance takes priority on our actual armor pieces. And then finally, for the plagued mod on here, I went with the parry disabled because I don't think I have ever once parried in this game. So it's a free downside for me. So that's what I went with. Last armor piece is the helmet. So for this helmet, it's basically the exact same as your gloves. We're going for armor penetration, 1 crit mod, the elemental damage, and then the physical resist with a non-impactful plagued mod. So literally the exact same as your gloves. Be aware you may need to replace the crit damage on your helmet with more crit chance, depending on how high of a crit chance you get and how well exalted your items are. So just be aware of that. If you want to hit 100% crit chance, it is mandatory that you actually get crit chance on your helmet instead of crit damage. So that's something else to be aware of. Now the rolls on my helmet, the exalted rolls are not ideal. The perfect would be, again, fully exalted crit damage, but I was getting very impatient trying to exalt so many different items and stuff, so I just went with what I had. But ideally this would be 4 exalted mods onto the crit damage. Would be perfect. For the facet on the helmet, I went with Agile. It doesn't really make much of a difference, but it at least provides some little type of a bonus. Lets me dodge or climb or sprint longer, whatever, more frequent. So I went with Agile on there, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So that covers the helmet. Finally, for the weapon, I went with a staff instead of a wand because the staff has a little bit higher base damage. The 2 main enchantments that we're looking for on here is going to be rune damage and crit damage, with crit damage being the most important. For the final 2 enchantments on here, I went with the movement speed increase after dealing damage with a rune attack. It says rune attack, but it works on spells. Go figure, early access. And then the final mod on here is actually wrong. I have health on staggering an enemy. I went with that because originally I was thinking, oh, I'm going to be dealing lightning damage. Let me try to get health on stagger since I'll be staggering them, and that's more useful for a boss scenario. But everything dies in 1 hit anyways, so nothing ever actually has a chance to get staggered, so this mod is actually completely worthless. Instead, the ideal mod would be health on fatality. Anytime you kill an enemy with a rune or spell skill, that counts as a fatality, so that's always for this build. So gain health on fatality is actually the best 4th enchantment that you can get on here. So go with that instead. For the plagued mod, we have attack stamina cost increase because we don't actually use our stamina to attack ever, so that's another free downside. For the facet on here, we go with Razor. At least I went with Razor for the increased crit chance. You could go with basically any of the crit facets, including the ones that just say crit damage increase instead of crit chance, but just be aware that if you go crit damage facet, that you might need to replace some of the enchantments on your armor items in order to maintain a high enough crit chance, so just be aware of that. And then finally for the gem on here, we go with the lifesteal. So lifesteal in this game does work on spells or runes. So that's what allows us to constantly be spamming our spells and never actually run out of life, because as soon as we cast a spell or a rune, then we hit the enemy, we kill them, and we do enough damage that we actually leech back to full instantly. So very important gem. But that does it for the weapon. Moving on to the spells that I actually use, the 2 main spells that I use are Lightning Bolt and Charged Bolt. So Lightning Bolt is my super strong single target, and then Charged Bolt is for mass AoE clear. Lightning Bolt does insane amounts of damage and leeches you to full life pretty much instantly. The only downside to it is that it does have a little bit of a sluggish cast speed, so just be aware of that. For Charged Bolt, it has a fantastic AoE. It will clear like your entire screen every time you use it. And it's also very inexpensive. It only costs 50 life in this case to actually cast, so it's very cheap. The downside to it is that it is one of these spells that seems to be bugged at the moment, and it does not actually leech life back, unfortunately. So it's not something that you're going to want to spam all the time because it won't leech you back. So generally, I'll use the Charged Bolt to mass AoE clear screen, and then I'll use the Lightning Bolt on a single target to leech back to full life after that. So there are a lot of different spells that you can use. Like I said, you can use spells from any different element on this build, just adjust your gear accordingly. But just be aware that there are multiple spells in the game that for whatever reason don't actually leech life for you. So that's just something that you got to keep an eye out for as you're testing out different skills that you want to use for your build. And one more thing on that note, there are different spell runes that seem to be quite rare, but as a possible option, there are certain items in the game that come with those powerful rune spells baked into them by default. So one good example of that is going to be the Tarnished Wand. It's the only legendary wand in the game, and that one comes with lightning bolt on it by default. So if you're not able to find the lightning bolt rune to put into an item that you're crafting, you can temporarily just use something like the Tarnished Wand for the lightning bolt, and then just adjust your attributes accordingly, and that works totally fine. I was using Tarnished Wand for a very long time before I crafted my staff, and I was still one-shotting everything, so it works totally fine. Final thing I'll go over here is our attributes. So you want enough equip load to stay at a normal weight class. After that, you're going to put roughly 30 points into focus. You want to be just a little bit over 300 hit points, seems to be a pretty comfortable spot. And this is because the most expensive spells in the game are going to cost us 150 health to actually use. So just in case one misses and you don't actually leech, you want to be able to cast it a second time. So just over 300 hit points, so right around 30 focus. And then finally, you're just going to dump all the remaining stat points into damage. So my weapon scales off of intelligence, so I stacked as much intelligence as I can. If you're using a weapon that scales off of faith, such as the Tarnished one that I had mentioned, just stack as much faith as you possibly can. So a little bit of equip load, a little bit of focus, and then stack all the damage that you possibly can. Anyways, that does it for the build, so thank you all for watching, and good luck saving the world out there, Sarah.